After Joe was moved to his reassigned room, a hotel staff member came to check on Ashlee. They knocked on the door. They asked if she needed anything. She told them to come back in 15 minutes. That was the last known interaction anyone has documented with Ashlee Jenay Robinson while she was alive. 15 minutes. The staff member came back, and Ashlee was found dead. The arguments did not start the night she died. That is the part people need to understand. By the time things reached the point of no return, the tension between Ashlee Jenay and Joe McCann had already been building for days. Days, not hours. Not one bad night that got out of hand. Days of conflict loud enough and frequent enough that the people around them could not ignore it. Neighbors at that resort were hearing it. Staff were aware of it. The environment around them had already shifted from a vacation to something that felt nothing like one. And if you have been following this case, you already know the broad strokes. But tonight we are going slow. We are going through every layer. Because the only way to understand what happened to Ashlee Jenay is to understand everything that led up to it, and everything that has been quietly buried since. So if you are new here, subscribe and hit that bell right now so you never miss an update on this case. And if you have been here from the beginning, stay with me, because this one is going to hit different. Let's start at the beginning of what we know. Ashlee Jenay Robinson and Joe McCann traveled to Zanzibar together. That trip was not a casual getaway between two people who barely knew each other. This was a relationship, a real one, or at least it was real on Ashlee's side. She was invested. She was there with a man she trusted, a man she had built something with, a man she believed she knew. And Joe McCann, by every outward appearance, was someone worth trusting. He is reportedly worth somewhere between $45 and $50 million. He is polished. He is the kind of man who knows how to present himself, how to be exactly what people need to see while keeping everything else out of frame. That is a skill, and Joe McCann had been practicing it for a long time. The power imbalance between them was real, and it was significant. Ashlee was a young woman thousands of miles from home, in a country where she did not have the same reach, the same connections, or the same financial weight that Joe did. That kind of imbalance does not always show up in obvious ways. It does not always look like control. Sometimes it just looks like one person having more options than the other, more ability to shape the situation, more room to maneuver when things go wrong. Joe had all of that. Ashlee was navigating a foreign country with the resources she had, in a relationship where the scales were never quite even. And underneath all of that, underneath the resort and the luxury and the surface of a couple on vacation, something was very wrong. Something had been wrong for a while. Because Joe McCann was not the man he had presented himself to be. Not fully. Not honestly. While he was with Ashlee, while she believed in what they had, Joe was involved with other women. Affairs. Multiple situations that existed completely outside of what Ashlee knew about. And here is the thing about a man who maintains that kind of double life. It does not happen by accident. It takes effort. It takes management. It takes a particular kind of calculation about who knows what, and when, and how much. Joe had been managing that calculation. And at some point in Zanzibar, the calculation stopped working. Ashlee found out. We do not know the exact moment. We do not know whether it was a message she saw, a name that came up, a conversation that went somewhere it was not supposed to go. What we know is that she found out. And everything that happened after that, every argument the neighbors heard, every escalation that the staff tried to manage, every day of tension that turned that resort from a vacation into something else entirely, all of it flows directly from that moment. From the moment a woman who trusted someone realized that the person she trusted had been deceiving her in the most intimate way possible, while she was thousands of miles from home, with no easy way out. That is the kind of discovery that does not produce a quiet conversation. That is the kind of discovery that produces exactly what the neighbors reported hearing. Days of it. Loud enough that it registered. Loud enough that people who were not in that room knew something serious was happening inside it. The arguments were not random. They were not two people who had simply grown frustrated with each other after too many days in close quarters. They were the sound of a woman demanding answers from a man who had built an entire architecture of deception around her. And Joe McCann, faced with that confrontation, did what men with resources and practiced deception tend to do. He managed it, or tried to, because managing the situation, keeping it contained, keeping it quiet, keeping it from becoming something that exposed him, was what Joe McCann was built for. He had been managing his image and his secrets for years. One confrontation in a hotel room in Zanzibar was not supposed to be the thing that undid all of it. But Ashlee was not the kind of woman who could be managed into silence. She had found the truth, and she was not letting go of it. And so the arguments kept going, day after day, loud enough for the resort to hear, serious enough that eventually management had no choice but to act. On April 8th, the hotel made the call. Joe McCann was physically moved to a different room, a room 8 to 10 minutes away on foot through the villa grounds. That is not a small thing. Hotels do not relocate guests, especially guests of Joe McCann's financial standing, unless the situation has reached a point where they simply cannot look the other way anymore. That relocation was a statement. It was hotel management saying, in the clearest way available to them, that something had gone seriously wrong between these two people and that the only responsible move was to put distance between them. They moved him. They logged it. The key card system tracked his access to the reassigned room, and Ashlee stayed behind in the room they had been sharing, alone, in a foreign country, processing the kind of betrayal that does not have a clean edge, the kind that keeps expanding the more you sit with it, the kind that makes the walls of a hotel room feel like they are closing in. Think about what that actually felt like. She is not at home. She cannot walk out her front door and call her best friend and sit on someone's couch and cry it out. She is in Zanzibar. Her support system is a phone call and an ocean away. The man who was supposed to be her person has just been removed from her space by strangers because the situation between them had become impossible. And she is sitting in that room with all of it. The betrayal, the arguments, the exhaustion of days of conflict, the disorientation of being far from home. And she has 15 minutes. Because that is when the hotel staff member came. They knocked on the door. They offered service. Ashlee told them to come back in 15 minutes. That exchange, that ordinary, routine check-in, is the last documented interaction anyone has publicly described with Ashlee Jenay Robinson while she was alive. 15 minutes passed. The staff member came back, and Ashlee was gone. Within 24 hours, Zanzibar officials issued their ruling. They classified her death as self-inflicted. Case closed. And the speed of that ruling, the sheer, breathtaking speed of it, is one of the most important facts in this entire story. Because investigations do not move that fast. Not real ones. Not thorough ones. Not ones where the person who was in the closest documented proximity to the victim had not yet been formally questioned. Joe McCann was not immediately questioned. Let that sit. The man who had been in documented, escalating conflict with Ashlee for multiple days. The man who had been physically removed from her space because that conflict had become too loud and too serious for the hotel to ignore. The man whose affairs were reportedly the reason those arguments started in the first place. That man was not the first person Zanzibar investigators sat down with. The ruling came before any of that happened in a meaningful, transparent, documented way. And here is where Joe McCann's resources become part of the story again. Because Zanzibar is a place where, by multiple credible accounts from people who live and work there, money moves differently than it does in a Western courtroom, where the right amount of financial weight in the right place can shape an outcome, where a ruling can come down fast not because the evidence demanded it, but because closing the case served more people than keeping it open. Joe McCann had the kind of resources that make that kind of outcome possible. And the ruling that came out of Zanzibar in 24 hours is the kind of ruling that benefits exactly one person in this story. The affairs did not end with Ashlee finding out. They did not end with the confrontation. They did not end with the arguments, or the separation, or the ruling. Because Joe McCann's pattern of behavior with other women is not a footnote in this story. It is a window into who he actually is behind the version of himself that he presents to the world. The man who maintains multiple relationships simultaneously, who keeps each one in a separate compartment, who manages the flow of information with the same precision he would apply to any other asset. That man does not become a different person when things go wrong. He becomes more of himself, more calculating, more focused on managing the outcome. And the outcome that needed managing after Ashlee died was significant. A young American woman was dead. An international investigation was a real possibility. His name was going to be connected to this no matter what. The question was how connected, and in what way, and what the official record would say about it. Joe McCann had every incentive in the world to make sure that record said as little as possible. The surveillance footage from that resort, footage that would show us exactly where Joe was, exactly when, in the window between his relocation and Ashlee being found, has not been released. The forensic evidence from her room has not been made public. The keycard logs tell us what the electronic access system recorded, but they do not tell us about the back of those villas. The windows, the doors without keycard readers. An 8 to 10 minute walk through open grounds at night, through whatever blind spots exist in that camera layout, through exits that do not require a card to open. The official record covers what it covers. It does not cover everything. What it does not cover is exactly what this case needs answered. Joe McCann has not given a public account of his movements in that window. He has not spoken to the level that this story demands. He has let the Zanzibar ruling carry the weight of the explanation. And the Zanzibar ruling, issued in 24 hours, without questioning him first, in an environment where his financial resources carry documented influence, has been doing an enormous amount of work on his behalf ever since. His passport was held for a period following her death. Officials cited the ongoing autopsy and investigation as the reason. But now that Zanzibar has released Ashlee's body, now that they have their samples and their findings, the question of what happens to Joe next is one that every person following this story is watching closely. Because if his passport is returned and he walks out of Zanzibar without charges, without a changed ruling, without any public accountability, that tells you everything you need to know about what the last week and a half actually was. The affairs matter in this story for a reason that goes beyond character judgment. They matter because they are the engine of everything that happened. They are why those arguments started. They are why Ashlee was in that emotional state in the final days and hours of her life. They are why the conflict reached the level it did. They are the context without which none of the rest of it makes sense. You cannot understand what Ashlee was going through in that room without understanding what she had just discovered about the man she was there with. You cannot understand the intensity of those arguments without understanding what was underneath them. And you cannot understand why she deserved so much better than a 24-hour ruling without understanding how completely she had already been failed by Joe, by the deception, by the life he was living behind her back while she was giving him her trust. She did not go to Zanzibar to die. She went there with someone she believed in, someone she had invested in, someone who had, by every account, been presenting her with a version of himself that was not the full truth. And when the full truth came out, when Ashlee finally saw clearly who Joe McCann actually was, the situation became something that the hotel could not contain and that Zanzibar has never fully accounted for. The investigation that should have started in the first hour has still not happened in the way it needs to. The ruling has not changed. The footage has not surfaced. And Joe McCann has not been held to account for anything. Not for the affairs, not for the conflict, not for the questions that his presence and his behavior and his resources raise every single day that this story stays open. Ashlee Jenay Robinson was loved. She was fought for. Her father posted her photo and wrote 4 words that cost everything. Her friends have been vocal and relentless. The people following this case, including you, right now, are part of the reason her body made it home and part of the reason this story has not been quietly buried the way powerful people needed it to be. But she deserves more than a body returned home. She deserves the truth about what happened in that room. She deserves an accounting of the man who was with her. She deserves the investigation that was owed to her from the very first moment she was found. Her name is Ashlee Jenay Robinson. She went to Zanzibar with someone she trusted. She found out who he really was. And what happened in the 15 minutes that followed is a question that has never been honestly answered. It still needs to be. If this story matters to you, subscribe and turn on notifications. We are not done covering this case, and we are not going anywhere until the truth comes out.